So I guess we'll start. Welcome everyone to a meeting of the Boston Region Metropolitan Planning Organization. I'm David Moeller, representing Secretary Monica Tibbetts-Nutt here. You are invited to participate in our transportation planning process regardless of your race, color, national origin, including limited English proficiency, religion, creed, gender, ancestry, ethnicity, disability, age, sex, sexual orientation, gender identity or expression, veteran status, or background. You can read the full notice of your rights and protections at www.bostmpo.org/MPO_NON_DISCRIMINATION. This meeting is accessible to people with disabilities. Zoom products are compliant with exceptions with the following standards: Web Content Accessibility Guidelines 2.1 Level AA standards and revised Section 508 standards. If you require any additional accommodations in order to participate fully in this meeting, or if you have any technical difficulties, please contact Sam Taylor of the MPO staff at staylor@ctps.org or at 857-702-3702 or via the chat box. All participants will join the meeting with muted microphones. Please rename yourself to include your first name, last name, and affiliation. After roll call, board members may mute and unmute themselves. Always remain muted unless actively speaking. To participate in the discussion, please select the raise hand function. Find this by clicking either on the participants button at the bottom of the screen, and a window will pop up with a raise hand button at the bottom, or the reactions button in the toolbar. The chair will then call on participants. If you're on the phone, you can use *9 to raise your hand. First item on the agenda is introductions, so please call the roll.
I will call the roll. MassDOT Seat 1.
This is David Moeller.
MassDOT Seat 2.
John Bouchard, present.
MassDOT Highway Division. MBTA.
Sandy Johnson, representing General Manager Phil Eng and the MBTA.
Massport. MAPC.
Good morning, Eric Barassa with the Metropolitan Area Planning Council.
Good morning. MBTA Advisory Board. Advisory Council.
Leonard Diggins as the Advisory Council here. Thank you.
Thank you. City of Boston, BPD.
Jen Rowe representing the City of Boston and Mayor Michelle Wu.
City of Boston, BPDA.
Chip Fitzgerald with BPDA representing Mayor Wu and City of Boston.
Thank you. At-large City of Everett.
Good morning, Jay Monty representing Mayor DiMaria and the City of Everett.
Good morning. At-large City of Newton.
Good morning, David Kozis representing Mayor Ruth Ann Fuller in the City of Newton.
Good morning. At-large Town of Arlington.
Good morning, John Alessi representing our new Select Board Chair, Steve DeCourcy, and the Town of Arlington.
Good morning. At-large Town of Brookline.
Good morning, Erin Chute representing Bernard Green, Chair of the Select Board for the Town of Brookline.
Good morning. Intercore Committee, City of Somerville.
Good morning, Tom Bent, City of Somerville, representing Mayor Katiana Ballantyne in the Intercore.
Morning. Minuteman Advisory Group on Interlocal Coordination, Town of Acton.
Good morning, Kristen Guichard representing Acton Select Board Chair Jim Snyder Grant for the Magic Subregion.
Morning. Metro West Regional Collaborative, City of Framingham. Next, Dennis will join a few moments later. Next, North Shore Task Force, City of Beverly.
Darlene Wynn, representing the North Shore Task Force and Mayor Cahill.
Welcome. North Suburban Planning Council, Town of Burlington. South Shore Coalition, Town of Hull. Southwest Advisory Planning Committee, Town of Rentham.
Rachel Benson here for Chair Joe Botash.
Welcome. Three Rivers Interlocal Council, Town of Norwood.
Good morning, Tom O'Rourke from the town of Norwood, representing the Trick Subregion.
Good morning. Federal Highway Administration. Federal Transit Administration.
Hi, Kirsty Hostetter, representing FTA Region 1.
Hello. In the roll call, is there anyone I have missed so far that would like to?
So there's John Romano.
John Romano, welcome.
John Romano here. Sorry, I joined late.
Not a problem.
And then Joshua Barber is here from Federal Highway.
Thank you.
Yes, I am. Usually Ken is here. He might show up, but I am here at the moment.
Roger that. Is there anyone else? Thank you, and that calls the roll, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda is the chair's report. I do not have one today, so we will go directly to Executive Director's report. Tegan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and welcome everybody. I have a relatively short report this morning. If you can go to the next slide, please. I just wanted to offer an engagement update. We have an update on our work on a federal fiscal year 24 discrete study, which was called Strategies for Environmental Outreach and Engagement. And the purpose of that study is to work to determine the best engagement strategies for us to pursue to better understand and meaningfully contribute to environmental and climate action in the region. As this study is ongoing, we have been engaging a variety of stakeholders to learn about their priorities and how they'd like to engage with us. And just this past Saturday, staff tabled at a Youth Climate Action Conference hosted by MIT. And at the conference, we talked about the MPO's environmentally relevant planning work, and we collected feedback on the engagement work that we're doing related to this discrete study. And we spoke with several high school students and some environmental stakeholders who are there about their priorities and ideas for transportation resilience. So in addition to tabling at events like this, as part of the study, we've also just released a survey, actually 2 surveys with different target audiences. One is for advocacy and community-based organizations, and the other is for municipal stakeholders. So I believe that links to those surveys will be shared in the chat. And we would really appreciate it if you work for a municipality, if you would take that back and share with your colleagues. If you know any community-based organizations or advocacy groups that you think should receive the survey that may not have, please let us know. And if you know any events related to any of those stakeholders in your communities, please also let us know if you think it might be helpful for us to connect with them. Stella Jordan is your contact if you would like to follow up on any of these items. So next slide, please. So for today's agenda, we will have 2 quick action items. One will be a work scope on work that we do engage in on a repeated basis related to the National Transit Database, or NTD. And then we will also have a quick vote on an amendment to the current TIP, the federal fiscal year 24 to 28 TIP. So if you choose, you can release that for a 21-day public review period. And then the bulk of the content today will be on presentations from the regional transit authorities, the RTAs, the MBTA, and MassDOT on their capital investment plans. And the intent for this is to have information on both their overall capital planning processes, as well as the federal funded elements of those plans presented to you in advance for your discussion and questions in advance of the meeting next week, when you will be asked to make a vote to release the TIP for public comment. So that will be at the April 18th meeting next week. And I just wanted to call the board's attention that just, due to the lots of information and changing information, we have posted some information closer to this meeting today. So I think yesterday there was an email notifying you all that there was some additional information from Mass Highway that was posted to the website about projects. And then also just today, we were also able to post some information from MBTA on their capital planning process and also projects. So those will be discussed today, but I just wanted to highlight for you that there are additional resources on the meeting calendar. So please take a look there. And then next slide, please. So on April 18th, next week, is when we will ask you to vote to release the entire federal fiscal year 25 to 29 TIP document, which will include the target funding scenario that you discussed and approved last week. Those are the projects that you have discretion over selecting, as well as the RTA, MBTA, and MassDOT prioritized projects that you will be discussing this week. And we'll ask that you release it for a public comment period. We'll have other agenda items next week. For example, we'll be discussing with you part of the federal certification review recommendations related to the MOU, the Memorandum of Understanding update. We'll be talking with you all about the RTA representation on the board. So there will be other items of interest, and we'll look forward to seeing you again next week virtually. And that is it, Mr. Chair. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Tegan. Any questions for Tegan? Seeing none, next item on the agenda is public comment. Is there anyone from the public who would like to comment at this time? Seeing and hearing none, if you want to comment during the meeting, please raise your hand and we will try to call on you. Next item is committee chairs reports. Are there any? Derek Cravat.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to give everyone a quick reminder that the UPWP committee will be meeting this afternoon. We'll be going over the ranking survey results for the proposed list of projects for the fiscal year 2025 UPWP and making some decisions on which discrete studies will be funded. So looking forward to seeing folks there. Thank you.
Thank you, Derek. Any questions for Derek? Seeing none, are there any other committee chairs reports? Seeing none, next item on the agenda is the Regional Transportation Council Advisory Report. Lynn Higgins.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So yesterday we had a meeting, and we discussed the preliminary update to the MOU regarding the advisory council's role, and I'm excited about the way that is starting off. And also had an update from Ethan, on the current scenario, the final scenario for the TIP, and he wowed my colleagues on the advisory council just as he has here. And finally, we discussed the UPWP a little bit. It got really interesting at that part of the meeting, and I see some interesting opportunities coming out of it. And so, with that teaser, I will end my update, my report, and look forward to the rest of the meeting. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Lynn. Any questions for Lynn? Seeing none, next item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes of March 7th. Can I get a motion in a second to approve the minutes, and please state your name for the record? Eric Barassa.
This is Eric Barassa. I'll make a motion to approve the March 7th meeting minutes.
John Alessi.
John Alessi, I'll second that motion.
Thank you. Motion has been made and seconded. Any comments, changes, questions, or suggestions? Seeing none, please call the roll.
David Moeller.
Yes.
John Bouchard.
John Bouchard, yes.
John Romano.
John Romano, yes.
Sandy Johnston.
Sandy Johnston, yes.
Eric Barassa.
Eric Barassa, yes.
Len Diggins.
Leonard Diggins, yes.
Jen Rowe.
Rowe, yes.
Jim Fitzgerald.
Fitzgerald, yes.
Jay Monty.
Jay Monty, yes.
David Kozis.
David Kozis, yes.
John Alessi.
John Alessi, yes.
Aaron Shute.
Aaron Shute, yes.
Tom Bent.
Tom Bent, yes.
Christian Guichard.
Kristen Guichard, yes.
Do we have Dennis Giambetti? Next calling Darlene Nguyen.
Darlene Nguyen, yes.
Rachel Benson.
Rachel Benson, yes.
Tom O'Rourke.
Tom O'Rourke, yes.
Please let me know if I've missed anyone. That motion carries. Mr. Chair, back to you.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda is another action item. It's the work scope for the MBTA fiscal year 2025 National Transit Database. Bradley Putnam.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, everyone. I'm here to present a work scope for MBTA State Fiscal Year 2025 National Transit Database. CTPS has been assisting the MBTA with their annual submissions to the National Transit Database for many years, and this work scope represents a continuation of that work. The budget for this scope is $234,000. and the MBTA will pay for this work. The schedule is 18 months from July 2024 to December 2025. The purpose of this project is to collect and analyze data for the MBTA about their transit ridership in order to help them make their annual required submissions to the National Transit Database. There are many components to this project. One is passenger surveys on heavy rail and light rail that are used to determine average passenger trip length and the average rate of transfer between modes. Another component is observations at fare gates and on Green Line vehicles to estimate how many passengers use or do not use fare boxes and fare gates when they board rail vehicles. Another component is bus passenger counts that are used to verify the MBTA's automatic passenger counter data on its buses. Another component is shuttle bus passenger counts that are used for when buses are substituting for rail service. I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have. Otherwise, I'd like to ask that you please vote to approve this scope. Thank you.
Thank you, Bradley. Any questions for Bradley? Seeing none, can I get a motion and a second to approve this scope as presented today? Lynn Diggins.
I'll motion to approve the work scope, Mr. Chair. Thanks.
Thank you. Eric Barassa.
I'll second that motion.
Thank you. Motion has been made and seconded. Please call the roll.
David Muller,
Yes.
John Bouchard,
John Bouchard, yes.
John Romano,
John Romano, yes.
Sandy Johnston,
Sandy Johnson, yes.
Eric Barassa,
Eric Barassa, yes.
Leonard Diggins,
Diggins, yes.
Jen Rowe,
Jen Rowe, yes.
Jim Fitzgerald,
Fitzgerald, yes.
Jay Monty,
Jay Monty, yes.
David Kozas,
David Kozas, yes.
John Alessi,
On Alessi, yes.
Aaron Shute,
Aaron Shute, yes.
Tom Bent,
Tom Bent, yes.
Kristen Guichard,
Kristen Guichard, yes.
Darlene Nguyen,
Darlene Nguyen, yes.
Rachel Benson,
Rachel Benson, yes.
Tom O'Rourke.
Tom O'Rourke, yes.
That motion carries, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Can someone fix whatever we're projecting? I can't see the slides anymore. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is the FY24 to 28 TIP Amendment number 6. Ethan LaPointe.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good morning, everybody. My name is Ethan LaPointe. I am the Transportation Improvement Program Manager with the Boston Region MPO. We can go on to the next slide. The purpose of my presentation here today is to present, discuss, and eventually vote to release the 6th Amendment to the federal fiscal years 2024 to 28 TIP, the current TIP, for a 21-day public comment period. We can go on to the next slide to start off with a summary of this amendment. There are 3 projects proposed for changes across the regional target, statewide highway, and federal discretionary programs, all in federal fiscal year 2024. This includes 2 bridge projects, one for a cost increase for a bridge rehabilitation project that carries Route 30 over the Charles River at the Newton-Weston border, and also a small off-system bridge replacement project in Canton. There's also the application of some carryover formula funding for ferry boat capital funds that were originally from federal fiscal year 2021 into the MBTA's catamaran overhaul project in federal fiscal year 2024. On the next slide, to go into some specific project detail, starting off with the Regional Target Program. This project is the Newton-Weston Bridge Rehabilitation for Commonwealth Avenue Route 30 over the Charles River with a cost increase as the project has recently reached the 100% design stage. This project originally began in the statewide highway program before being programmed within the Regional Target Fund. And its cost increase from $21.85 million to $27.7 million will likely be accommodated within the statewide highway program, with the remainder still being in federal fiscal year 24 of the Regional Target Fund. The project is currently funded with National Highway Performance Program dollars in the Target Program. The cost increase will be funded with Highway Investment Program bridge funding in statewide highway. On the next slide, for the next statewide highway bridge project, this one being in Canton. This is a fairly small-scale bridge project which carries Revere Court over the west branch of the Neponset River in Canton. The cost currently is at $2.33 million, with a new budget estimate of $3.58 million to reflect a new figure provided by the achievement of plans, specifications, and estimates, or PS&E, in early March on the contract. And then the third project in this amendment, can go on to the next slide, please, is the MBTA's catamaran overhaul project. This is using formula funding in the ferryboat capital program, but is falling under the discretionary program, as is utilizing carryover funding from federal fiscal year 2021 onto the MBTA's catamaran project in order to enable an overhaul of some of their 149 passenger ferries. I should say there are 149 passengers, not 149 ferries, to be more specific, alongside the provision for spare parts, test equipment, tools, and training of operators and other staff at the facilities there. This is about $626,000. With that, if we can move on to the next slide, staff will request that the board votes to release Amendment 6 for a 21-day public comment period, wherein public comment would begin this coming Monday, April 15th, and conclude on May 6th, 2024. With that, happy to field any questions.
Thank you, Ethan. Any questions for Ethan or the divisions? Jinro?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We just had a question about the catamaran project. We're curious if is that for maintenance of the ferry or the two vessels that were replaced in like 2017, 2018 that do run Hingham service? Because we asked because we were pretty excited about the goal that was put forward in the Inner Harbor Connector Plan of procuring some smaller vessels to operate Inner Harbor service. We're curious how this fits in with that.
Ethan, do you know, or should I be calling on Sandy? Oh, Sandy's got his hand up. Sandy.
I was going to say, unfortunately, I don't know off the top of my head, but I'm happy to find out.
Excellent. We will get you an answer, Jen, before we vote this out for final approval. Lynn Diggins?
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair, and please forgive these curiosity questions, but can you explain, Ian, how it is that we're dealing with 2021 funds now? I know everything's legit, but it's just from so long ago. I'm just kind of curious how funds from then become available now.
Yes, so Federal Highway, you have to obligate the money in the year it's provided. Federal Transit, you can actually carry money forward. I believe what Sandy said was this is actually carryover from 21. So I think this was money that was provided in 21, either obligated and not fully spent, in which case we're carrying over the remainder, or never obligated but has not yet expired. And I believe Federal Transit's general rule is it expires within, I think, 4 years. It might be 3 years. So for transit projects, you have the ability to carry money forward. For highway projects, you do not.
Next time I ask that question, just tell me to go and look at the recording from this meeting. And back it up 2 more slides, where we talk about the perhaps excess cost. Yeah, so this one. So you use the word may here, as opposed to will. So what happens, if the state highway program doesn't pick it up? The increased costs, all of the increased costs. Okay,
Yeah, I just wanted to confirm that in coordination with our highway division, we do have the ability and the available balance in that it's that HIP Highway Infrastructure Program BR to cover that increase. So Ethan, I believe at the time we had exchanged emails on this. It was moving quickly, but we did get that confirmation that we're able to accommodate it. But we'll confirm during the comment period and make sure everything is up to date before it's endorsed.
Okay,
right.
All right.
But the amendment that's going out has to be financially constrained. And that amendment is going to show this $5.8 million increase funded with highway bridge investment or bridge funds from the highway side of the tip. Yes?
Correct. Yes.
Correct.
Yeah, there is available balance there, and we've confirmed that it will be used on this project. Yep.
There you go. Thanks, Lynn.
Yep.
Thank you. Now that I've done my due diligence, I'll sleep better tonight. Thanks.
Any other questions? Seeing none, can I get a motion in a second to release this for a 21-day public review process? Lynn Diggins.
After that, how could I not approve the release of it for public review?
Thank you. Motion has been made. Is there a second? Jen Rowe.
Second that motion.
Thank you. Motion has been made and seconded. Please call the roll.
David Moeller,
Yes.
John Bouchard,
John Bouchard, yes.
John Romano,
John Romano, yes.
Sandy Johnston,
Sandy Johnston, yes.
Eric Barassa,
Eric Barassa, yes.
Len Diggins again,
Dickens, yes.
Jen Rowe,
Jen Rowe, yes.
Jim Fitzgerald,
Fitzgerald, yes.
Jay Monty,
Jay Monty, yes.
David Kozis,
David Kozis, yes.
John Alessi,
John Alessi, yes.
Aaron Shute,
Aaron Shute, yes.
Tom Bent,
Tom Bent, yes.
Kristen Guichard.
Kristen Guichard, yes.
Thank you. Darlene Nguyen,
Darlene Nguyen, yes.
Rachel Benson,
Rachel Benson, yes.
and Tom O'Rourke.
Tom O'Rourke, yes.
That motion carries, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda is a presentation from the RTAs on their capital investment plans. We'll start with Metro West Regional Transit Authority, Jim Nee.
Hi, thank you so much. Dave, do we have the slides from? Awesome. Next slide, please. So the regional transit authorities, we develop a 5-year project list, and we obviously work within the capital investment program. We submit those lists to MassDOT. Those projects are housed within the ESTIP program, and we also use the Grants Plus platform for application entry, reporting, and invoicing. We also obviously work very closely with the Boston MPO for the TIP development, which becomes obviously the STIP. Next slide, please. So the way the RTAs do this, it's very similar for both CADA and for Metro West. We kind of look at these processes by quarter. We assess sort of the capital needs from a 5-year perspective. Our capital formula funding from the federal government comes in the form of 5307, and those funds are primarily intended for capital investment, though you'll see demand response and ADA paratransit service listed here because that is an alternative use that is permissible for those funds. And historically, the RTAs have had to use some of those formula capital funding for the ADA operations. So that those programs are evaluated. The vehicle needs are reviewed with the TAM. Other capital investments such as state of good repair, building, technology, safety, and capital outreach are also evaluated. And in Q2, we prepare our draft 5-year plan, and that is sent to MassDOT for review. Next slide, please. Q3, after hearing from our federal partners on what the Boston UZA allocation will be, there's obviously a split agreement with all the subrecipients. And that process sort of approval and signature back and forth happens in Q3. And here we are in Q4, where we work with MassDOT as well as the Boston MPO to sort of move that project list, what's been approved by MassDOT, to the Boston MPO for approval in April and hopefully released and endorsed in May. Next slide, please. So my teammate here, Tyler Tarasi, he works very closely with me on a number of these programs, and he's been helping us with a lot of government affairs. I'm going to ask Tyler to kind of just do a brief overview of the upcoming years and some of our capital investments and what we're looking at.
Thank you, Jim. Hope everyone can hear me okay and see me.
Yes, we can.
Perfect. Morning, everyone. So as Jim mentioned, we do have a variety of projects that we are currently engaged in and will be continuing to pursue over the next several years. I'll just summarize what these are now. You can see on the slides as well. We have in FY25, we're going to be replacing and expanding our fixed route vehicle fleet. And that includes the introduction of heavy-duty, low-emissions, and other higher capacity vehicles, and supporting maintenance equipment as well. We're also going to replace some of our, 2 of our gasoline-powered demand response vehicles with fully electric electric vans. We want to obviously maintain vehicle and infrastructure state of good repair, very important. Our Blandon Hub Equitable Redesign Initiative. It's something that we've been wanting to do to expand the driver and dispatch facility. Specifically in FY25, we're going to be finalizing the facility ADA accessibility design. We want to expand the maintenance facility as well to include zero emissions bus, as well as heavy duty transit vehicle storage, and a body shop as well. We want to expand, and as I said, for our dispatch and contractor operations and driver offices as well. We were awarded a grant from the US DOT SMART program in last spring, 2023. We're going to be applying for phase 2. It's a discretionary program, of course. We're going to be looking at the final design and construction process for our Blandon Energy and Sustainable Storage Technology project. It's basically a project dealing with vehicle to grid and renewable energy technology, generation technology, and storage and charging technology for our demand response fleet. Now, moving on to FY26, we're going to continue our fixed route vehicle replacement and expansion projects, more heavy duty, low emission transit vehicles, and other higher capacity vehicles as well to expand our capacity, seating capacity and vehicle capacity for our routes. And of course, the related maintenance and equipment infrastructure, and state of good repair, of course. We're going to continue our zero emissions bus transition. We're going to be starting, hopefully, our phase 2 smart Blandon Energy Sustainable Storage Technology construction. And we'll be undertaking the final design of our equitable redesign initiative for the Blandon Hub. And now if we move on to the next slide here, that has FY27. More vehicle replacements going on there. We also have, of course, state of good repair once again, and our fleet transition. And for our Blandon Hub Equitable Redesign Initiative, we'll be closing that out. And commissioning will be going on at that point. And for our Smart Phase 2, we're hoping to close out construction of that project and the commissioning of that project as well. We're also looking at fuel cell vehicle and the fueling station feasibility study. Phase 1 of that for having possible implementation of hydrogen vehicles as a sustainable low emissions vehicle source. And FY28, we have replacing and maintaining our vehicles still, state of good repair. And notable project there is, let's see here, we've got our hoping to have our demand response fleet fully electrified by that point. Also looking to relocate and construct a relocated fixed route passenger transfer station. And we'll be continuing our fuel cell, hydrogen fuel cell feasibility study. We should be in phase 2 by that point. And finally, in FY29, once again, we have our state of good repair, our heavy, continuing our heavy duty vehicle acquisition for our fixed route fleet, zero emissions buses, high capacity vehicles. We have as well our demand response fleet continuing to promote electrification of those vehicles as well. So that's pretty much a rundown of our projects. Sure, Jim's happy to field any questions, or if we want to turn it over to Felicia, but thank you all for your time today.
Thank you. I think we'll take questions first on Metro West before we turn it over to Kata. Are there any questions for Metro West? Eric Barassa.
Yeah, thank you, Jim. Thank you, Tyler. This is a really good overview. One question I have: what do you guys have like a mandate or a goal for when your vehicles are fully sort of zero emission?
Yeah, so there's different goals depending on if you look at the state or federal level. When it comes to our capital investments, obviously very heavily invested in federal dollars and federal regulations, though even when it's not federal dollars, we're sort of bound by those federal regulations. And then there's the state goals as well, which are very important to us. And they're not exactly the exact same. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to sort of maximize, or as expeditiously as possible, reduce the worst emitting technology over the next several years, which is currently our demand response fleet, which is all petrol, fossil fuel for the demand response fleet. So we're focused on that first for an EV transition. We also believe that the range and the duty cycle for those vehicles can be more easily accommodated with vehicles that are on the current market versus the sort of longer duty cycles, longer range needs. Right now, the battery electric buses, the range is still a little bit in question, and the sort of supply chain on actually manufacturing them and the cost is a little bit difficult right now. So we're looking at, for the future, are we doing battery electric buses versus hydrogen fuel cell buses? But we definitely want to be zero emissions on that. So when it comes to our strategy, it's a combination of looking at the federal goals, the state goals, and saying, how do we eliminate the worst first, do this as expeditiously as possible, and essentially look at every federal discretionary grant program we can, as well as looking to the Boston MPO for those opportunities to invest in this cleaner technology. So we have a general transition timeline where approximately 5 years from now, we want the entire demand response fleet transitioned to zero emissions technology. And our goal would be that from 10 years from now, the entire demand response fleet remains zero emissions technology. And that at that point, at 10 years out, our entire fixed route fleet has been transitioned at that point. So that's sort of our timeline and goals.
Like 2035.
Yeah, we want by 2035, we want zero emissions across the board by that point. So trying to do this sort of deliberately, intentionally, methodically over time, using where we can the discretionary federal grant programs, but also doing it responsibly, because it's not just about the vehicle acquisition, which obviously can be difficult. It's also the infrastructure build out. That's a huge piece of this. And I wish it was just the rolling stock, but the infrastructure piece, as you can see from our investment plan here, we're really invested in sort of feasibility design. We want to make sure we get this right.
Thanks.
Other questions? Seeing none, we will now turn to Kata.
All right. I am Felicia Webb. I'm the administrator with the Cape Ann Transportation Authority. Thank you for having me today, and thanks for Jem for the overview of the capital planning process. CATA does follow the same process as Metro West for preparing our capital programming. We are just a much smaller RTA with less projects. Just to put our size in perspective, CATA receives between 500,000 and 700,000 in 5307 formula funds. A good portion of those are used for preventive maintenance. So we've historically relied more heavily on RTA cap. We can flip through these slides because it's just repeating what Jim said. If you want to go to slide 4 or 5, that is CATA's 25 scenario. There we go. So our scenario for 25 to 29 includes 5307 formula funds, funding through the Transit Transformation Program, RTA cap, and local funds. And next slide. In 25, we have programmed our regular preventive maintenance activities and for the purchase of small capital and shop equipment. These are regularly programmed and reoccurring capital items. We have also programmed for the replacement of 4 revenue vehicles. The vehicles being replaced reach the end of their useful life in state fiscal year 22 and 23. Funding for these vehicles is a combination of 5307 through the Transit Transformation Program and RTA cap. We have also programmed for a number of building maintenance activities. Our building was originally constructed in the early 1980s, and we did rehab it when we moved in early 2000s, but there are a number of items still original to the building. We've programmed to rehab several restrooms and locker rooms and replace the windows throughout the facility. The restroom, locker rooms, and windows are original. We've also programmed to repave the parking area, upgrade our fuel and fluid systems, replace the garage door, and acquire a generator. Funding for these projects is a combination of funding through the Transit Transformation Program and RTA cap. We have programmed for an ADA dial-a-ride fare collection system, which would allow customers to pay for rides through an account-based system. Currently, almost all of our ADA and dial-a-ride customers have to pay with cash. Funding for this project is 5307 funds through the Transit Transformation Program and RTA cap. And we have also programmed for support vehicles and replacement vans through RTA cap, along with automatic passenger counters and AVL GPS for both internal use and for use by our customers. Next slide. In 26, we have programmed our regular PM and small capital. We are programming the replacement of 3 vehicles that reached the end of their useful life in 2020 and 2022, and a continuation of the APC AVL GPS project. And then looking toward the out years of 27, 28, and 29, it's our regular preventive maintenance, maintenance and upkeep of our facility. And there in 29, future vehicle replacement, which could include a shift to alternate fueled vehicles. But that is an overview of our capital planning process and what we have on the horizon.
Thank you. Questions for Kata? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda, I believe, is the MBTA Capital Investment Plan. Ryan Josty.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I'm going to give a brief introduction, and then we will call on Lindsay and then Ryan.
Okay, thanks, Sandy.
All right. I believe we have slides that were going to be incorporated into the slide deck. If not, one of us can share our screen. Apologies for that.
Yeah, I don't think we have the slides, but I can give you screen sharing ability.
Okay. Ryan, if you're, I believe you're here, if you could share your screen, that would be great.
Sure, just give me one sec. I didn't have this pulled up.
Thank you. And while we are at it, I will put I believe the slides have been posted to the meeting calendar, so folks can follow along there. And again, apologies to that. I put the link in the chat.
Folks, you should be able to see my screen now if you want to take it away, Sandy, with intros.
I am not seeing the slides. Oh, there we are. Excellent. Okay. Ryan, we are seeing kind of the edit screen, not the full slide. All right, well, we'll just jump into it, and Ryan, maybe you can figure that out. Thank you. So we could go to the next slide, please. Thank you, everybody, for listening to us today. We have kind of three things we'd like to accomplish with this presentation. The first is to go over some of the basics of the MBTA's fiscal years 2025 through 29 capital investment program, our 5-year rolling capital plan. The second is to provide information on federally funded projects that are included in our CIP and that will be included in the MPO TIP through the transit program that the MPO can vote to approve. That is non-MPO target federal formula funding from FTA Section 5307, Section 5337, and Section 5339. And then the third thing that we are going to do is to preview the expected TIP amendment that we will bring next week that will accompany adoption of the vote to release the 25 to 29 TIP. That will be bringing up the current TIP, 24 to 28 TIP, up to date with MBTA project status for the projects that are included in the current TIP. So I'm going to hand it over first to Lindsay Heffernan, who's our Chief of Policy and Planning, and then she will hand it off to Ryan, who is our Director of Capital Program Planning, and then we will come back to me very briefly at the end.
Great. Thank you so very much, Sandy. Really nice to be with you all. If we can go forward a slide and one more. As was said, Lindsay Heffernan, I'm the Chief of Policy and Strategic Planning, and the capital planning team at the MBTA rolls up to me. And our goal here is to make sure that we are developing and investing in a transportation system of the future, and ideally aligned with the goals of both the administration, the Secretary of Transportation, and General Manager Ang. We have a proposed CIP that includes investments to target critical asset needs, to keep the path on a T to better safety, service, and sustainability, and advances towards a transportation system of the future. Our investment objectives really focus in these three buckets along the bottom here: safety, reliability, and modernization, accessibility, and then sustainability and resilience. We can go forward to the next slide. So you all know this, I think, well aware. Obviously, our CIP encompasses all of our capital expenditures programmed over the next 5 years, includes both new and ongoing projects, and is updated annually. It's our fiscally constrained process, meaning we're accounting for our current commitments and our funding sources to program investments based on our funding availability. We can go to the next slide. What I wanted to spend a couple minutes, though, talking about is sort of what is different and what is changing at the MBTA. Under the leadership of General Manager Ang, we are really revamping and rethinking our entire capital program strategy to generate efficiencies and deliver projects that are on time and on budget. In order to ensure that efficient spend, we have reviewed all, as I would say, as of our capital investment plan for fiscal 24 to 28, all 597 projects. Got in a room for a couple of days and walked through every single project to make sure that those projects were going to be delivered on time, to make sure that funding still met the priorities of the Healy Driscoll administration and the general manager, while critically reviewing any areas where we could course correct or find efficiencies. We then are taking our current asset information and making sure that that's driving investments. I think many of you are aware that the MBTA released a capital needs assessment in November of 2023, where we are really building out our entire asset management system to understand where we need to be targeting future investments. In line with this, it's important that the MBTA, as we rethink our capital strategy, make sure we think about how we're organized to deliver those projects. That means not only the people at the T who have to do the work, but the alignment of project schedules. How many weekends of outages do we need? Are we going to be able to deliver those within the constraints that we have on any given day to also deliver service? We're also targeting areas where we can improve right-of-way access to minimize diversions. Where can we put crossovers in our system to avoid disruptions for all riders and run more reduced service? And how can we do some of this to ultimately reduce construction costs? For instance, our track outage program carries significant costs for busing every time we do a diversion that we're bearing on our capital program. It's notable and important to say that the MBTA is spending a lot of time thinking about what is our internal workforce capacity? Is it where it needs to be? And how do we continue to grow it to address our state of good repair? That's everything from having a new chief of stations and facilities and building out our internal maintenance staff, but also trying to determine what should be in-house and what should be sourced out. And finally, looking at the overall chain competitiveness and supplier and contractor diversity to ensure that we're holding our contractors accountable as well as ourselves to deliver projects on time and within budget. So there's two areas, you can go to the next slide, please, that I want to spend a few minutes on because they are both not only high profile, have high rider impact, and are really important to the future of our capital plan. As you know, the trade-offs are hard, and trade-offs are very important. And so this slide is really all about the trade-offs that we're making in order to safeguard and prioritize the safety of our riders, the reliability of our service, and the modernization of our assets. So again, grounded back in that asset criticality and our ability to deliver, the MBTA is planning to repurpose or allocate new and additional funds for the proposed FY25 to 29 CIP to target two important areas. One is the track improvement program. As folks are aware who are in the greater Boston area and know anything about transportation, the T has been going through a series of closures and sometimes weekend access and overnight work to address the slow zones across our system to support both our near-term needs and these longer-term needs. Funds have been resequenced from certain projects, and I want to note three of them in particular: Longfellow Viaduct rehabilitation, a new design for a commuter rail maintenance facility in Billerica, and track and signal updates on the Green Line. These programs have been resequenced, and so that we can use the funds that were allocated to those programs in order to deliver the track improvement program. We do intend to keep these projects on their current timelines, and to do so, that will require the need for us to refund those projects when they're at the point in time where they're ready to be delivered. The red and orange line vehicles on the right side of your screen is another complicated story. As folks I think are probably aware, at MBTA board's meeting in March, our board approved a contract reset for our contract with CRRC to ensure that we have those vehicles delivered by 2027. Those vehicles are 4 times more reliable than our current fleet, and we're spending significant dollars to keep that current fleet maintained. But in order to do that, the MBTA needed to identify $148 million for that program. And we have done that in a variety. I've identified those funds in a variety of ways. First and foremost, that process of going through each and every project in the CIP as it stands, and ensuring that we were meeting the goals again of the organization, we recouped $80.3 million from our current program. The vast majority of that, I will say, comes from funds that were being held for hybrid electric buses. And as I've heard from a couple of my colleagues at the RTAs, the MBTA is also making a shift to an entirely battery electric fleet. So while we had options and money set aside for the possibility of hybrid electric buses for the future, we are pulling those funds back. We are also, that funding totaled $55.6 million of the 80. We also have $8 million in a contingency for a particular work car, a vacuum vehicle on our high rail equipment, which we had a larger than needed contingency. We had 8 projects that we were able to recover between $1 and $8 million, either due to a tighter alignment on the project scope, prioritization of needs from today's leadership, a review of the contracts and/or their contingencies. And finally, we had about a dozen projects in closeout with relatively small unexpended dollars, which when all totaled together, we pushed them through to closeout. We were able to recoup $3.9 million. So again, $80.3 million coming from our FY24 to 28 program. And then looking forward towards new dollars, we will be combining that with $53.7 million in new dollars for the CRRC project. And then finally, again, trying to make sure that we're spending our dollars as efficiently and appropriately as we can. There are two projects for which we have repurposed the dollars for in the near term. $5.9 million from the Copley to Arlington track work. Much of that, I will say, well, excuse me, all of that 5.9 was uncommitted dollars. And predominantly that work was addressed in the track improvement plan. And so those were dollars that were a future design to do work, and we've advanced that and funded it through the track improvement plan. And then lastly, we are using $8.1 million, which had previously been allocated to the Arboway bus design, facility design funding project. That had $33.9 million in uncommitted dollars. And so we are pulling 8 of that 33.9. This project, I want to be clear, remains an agency priority and critical to the continuation of decarbonizing the MBTA bus fleet. It is still funded through complete design. However, the full project costs of that project are north of $500 million. Leaving those dollars sitting in the CIP today when we have more immediate needs really did not make sense for the MBTA and necessitated the use of those dollars for the to help us with the CRRC need of today. At this point in time, I'm going to hand it off to Ryan, who's going to walk through some of the 25 to 29 highlights, and then I'll take it back at the end. Go ahead, Ryan. And welcome him to the T. He's got a whole 3 months under his belt, and this is a very complicated program.
Thank you, Lindsay. Good morning, everybody. So overall, the CIP includes 630 projects with total program spend reaching approximately $9.6 billion over the course of the CIP. Of this $9.6 billion, $843 million is new funding. New funding is programmed for both new projects not previously included in the CIP and projects in the existing CIP, which required additional funds. This includes the green line, blue line, red line, orange line, and Mattapan line investments, accounting for the highest level of program spending, followed by commuter rail, and then system-wide investments in the bus and silver line. We also have on the right-hand side the breakdown of the proposed funding and where it is sourced from. 38% comes from federal funds, 11% from state funds. The other half is MBTA funds, and then there is also a 1% remainder for reimbursable funds. The chart on the slide shows the proposed 25 to 29 CIP spending breakdown by program compared to the fiscal year 24 to 28 CIP. Most programs remain mostly flat in terms of percentage of total funding when compared to the prior year, with notable exceptions being vehicles as well as guideway, signal, and power programs. The percentage of proposed spending for the vehicles program increased compared to fiscal year 24 to 28, as a number of significant vehicle procurements continued to move forward, including the procurement of the new red and orange line vehicles, the procurement of the new Type 10 fleet on the green line, and the procurement of battery electric buses. The reduction in guideway, signal, and power spend is driven in part by the continued progress made on ATC implementation on the commuter rail, as well as other project schedule adjustments. To keep the MBTA on a path to better safety, service, and sustainability, investments proposed in the fiscal year 25 to 29 CIP focus on advancing towards the transportation system of the future with 4 main focuses. Safety, reliability, and modernization, which focuses on reliable operations, efficient project delivery, and fewer diversions in the long run. Enhanced and improved accessibility to provide accessible service across all of our modes. Climate action, address sustainability and resilience in line with the Commonwealth and MBTA's decarbonization, climate resiliency, and mobility goals. Lastly, modal initiatives, such as bus and rail modernization, to give riders the system that they expect. Highlighted in this slide are some of the major investments included in the CIP to support our investment objectives. And to briefly highlight them, we propose structure and station improvements, which includes full funding for the replacement of North Station Draw 1, which was critical to the commuter rail service lines. Funding is proposed to be allocated to advanced bus network redesign and transit signal priority, as well as infrastructure needs for a decarbonized pilot on the commuter rail. Additionally, the proposed CIP also entails work tied to our tracks, right-of-way, service redundancy, and sustainability and resilience of our system. The MBTA remains committed to bus and rail modernization and continues to advance these initiatives with current funding allocations and with new funding included in the proposed 25 to 29 CIP. On bus modernization, the CIP includes new funding for ongoing implementation of bus network redesign and the 2023 Transit Priority Vision that was presented and approved by our board of directors. Current funding continues to advance the construction of our new Quincy bus facility, the retrofit of the North Cambridge facility, the procurement of battery electric buses, and the overhaul of our existing fleet as we transition to an electric fleet. On rail modernization, the CIP includes new funding for infrastructure to support decarbonized service on the Fairmount line. New funding also encompasses rail modernization planning funds. And lastly, as the GM mentioned in last month's board meeting, the MBTA hopes to pilot a decarbonized segment of the commuter rail. Current funds will continue to support design activities for decarbonized service on the environmental justice corridor through Lynn and rail modernization early actions on the Framingham-Worcester line. Safety, reliability, and modernization, as in previous years, continues to be the focal investment objective of the 25 to 29 CIP, as we work towards addressing critical asset needs. Under this investment objective, the focus is to bolster the asset-based programs, enhance access to our right-of-way, beginning with the red line, and strengthen our efforts to target our facilities. A key piece of the puzzle as we work to bring the system into a state of good repair is modernization. Our focus on state of good repair also represents an opportunity to modernize and upgrade our assets, revitalizing and improving our system's reliability, accessibility, and sustainability. Examples of SGR and modernization efforts in the CIP include replacement of North Station Drawbridge 1 to ensure the continuity of all of the commuter rail's north side services, and the Green Line's Type 10 vehicle procurement, which will increase capacity and accessibility for our riders, as seen on the right. Accessibility is another one of our key objectives, targeting current inaccessible stations, stops, and other priority locations with a focus on passenger facilities, our fleet, and the ways in which our riders interact with our system. To provide equitable access for all riders, the proposed CIP includes funding for major accessibility improvements. On the Green Line and bus systems, as seen on the left, the MBTA is proposing to fully fund through construction accessibility improvements at inaccessible stations and bus stops. On the commuter rail and ferry systems, as seen on the right, the intent is the same, with funding assigned to improve accessibility at several of our passenger facilities. Our final key investment objective is the sustainability and resilience of our transit system and supporting the state's important climate and mobility goals. To do so, we're focused on projects that help electrify our system, harden our assets against the effects of climate change, and reduce our emissions and carbon footprint. As we work to hit these targets, additional planning efforts for climate mitigation and adaptation are key to building a sustainable and resilient system. The proposed CIP sets up for the future with additional funding for vulnerability assessments, adaptation planning for all of our modes and all of our assets. Additional proposed funding for fleet upgrades, energy efficiency measures, and electric vehicle charging stations at facility system-wide are key to our system electrification efforts, while also improving climate resilience and service redundancy. And I will turn it back over to Lindsay for SGR and sources.
Thank you very much, Ryan. So what challenges does the MBTA face to meet this full vision of a transportation system for the future? Two key ones have already been mentioned, and I'll just do a slide or two on each. an obvious significant state of good repair needs that well eclipse our current sources of fundings and declining CIP funding sources for the future. So we can go to the next slide. Some of you may have seen this previously. Our state of good repair needs, as highlighted in the 2023 Capital Needs Assessment Report, are significant. That has now been posted online as well. You can find the full printed report. While this exercise is a valuable tool for our capital program strategy, it is not saying that the agency needs $24 billion today. Each of these circles or donuts that you see on the screen show assets out of a state of good repair. That is, what is in blue is bad, less good, I should say. Represent a really complex portfolio of 75,000 plus assets that need further evaluation and be assembled into capital projects or programs to tackle their replacement over multiple years. Similar to the track improvement program, addressing the condition of our assets requires a complex and multi-year planning, design, construction, and procurement process. This asset information will help to drive and inform investments as part of the annual CIP development process, as we also navigate our financial challenges to spend effectively and efficiently to give the riders the system that they expect and deserve. We can go to the next slide. In terms of our historical ability to spend, as the chart here shows, the MBTA has significantly ramped up capital spending in the last 5 years, with spending hitting $1.85 billion last fiscal year. The majority of that $1.85 billion was spent on the reliability and modernization initiatives to improve safety and reliability of our system. In FY25 to 29 CIP, we have programmed $9.6 billion in total spending over our 5-year window, indicating that we anticipate a strong level of spending to continue in fiscal 25. However, as the next slide will show you, declining funding sources in the future, particularly starting in FY30 and beyond, may hinder our ability to continue this level of spending. So again, looking beyond the 5-year window, as you see here, current out-year sources assumptions do reflect a continued downward trend when compared to recent capital program spend levels. This is primarily driven by the absence of state funds as existing sources, which were tied to specific projects like South Coast Rail and Green Line Extension, are expected to wrap up their spending. We are also assuming relatively flat levels of MBTA bond issuance. Secondarily, there's uncertainty about federal funding levels beyond FY26 when BIL expires. It is unclear currently whether formula funding will be reauthorized at those higher BIL levels or may revert back to pre-BIL levels of funding. To address this uncertainty, we have estimated that federal formula levels will remain flat beyond FY26. It is important to note, however, that this chart does not assume additional fair share tax funding. I'm well aware that the House budget was released yesterday, and we're certainly we have a keen eye on that, nor does it include discretionary grants beyond what the MBTA has already received, which could result in higher than expected funding availability in future years. But as none of those sources are guaranteed, they certainly are not programmed at this point in time. If you can go to the next slide. The next steps for the MBTA CIP, we presented this morning to our Audit and Finance Subcommittee. So if we seem rehearsed, you're our round 2. We appreciate you all. We'll be presenting to our full board on April 25th, and that will officially launch our public comment process. On that date and time, you'll find not only a presentation, but the entire CIP book and the project list to be posted online, of course, meaning projects coming from all sources. We will then host a couple of public meetings in the first and second week of May. On the 2nd and the 7th, would welcome your letting people know about those. They'll be up on our events page shortly. And then close public comment on May 16th, with the plan to be back to our Audit and Finance Subcommittee on June 6th with a proposed final CIP, given all the input from the public, and hopefully a board vote 1 week later on June 13th. For those that follow, often in the month of June, the MBTA has more than one board meeting in order to finalize the end of the fiscal year. I will note a couple of things. We are late, and for all of you who have been waiting, I apologize. That process of going through every project took us about a month to do all of the work in advance, and then the scrubbing thereafter, bumping us right up against both your timeline for the tip, for which I apologize, but also our timeliness for some other statutory pieces. I've already had conversations with Mr. Kane at the advisory board. We recognize that we are delayed. However, I think I would hope many of you would agree that the efficiencies we found in our process and the changes we plan for the future are ultimately going to benefit all of our riders. I have 4 more slides about the tip, and then would welcome any questions that you may all have for us. So I'm going to move into a quick overview. I promise I will be quick. Of our federal fiscal year 24 to 28 tip amendment and the proposed federal fiscal year 25 to 29 transit program. Obviously, the MBTA brings, we hope, regionally significant and federally funded projects to the MPO for the incorporation of the tip plan. This slide shows our draft federal fiscal year 24 to 28 tip amendment, which includes projects funded by a variety of federal sources, including 88 projects using formula funding, along with formula funding that would be used for preventative maintenance activities. 1 project funded through the MPO Community Connections Program. 7 projects supported by the Boston MPO Regional Target Funding, 3 of which are new for federal fiscal year 25 to 29 tip. 4 projects receiving discretionary grant awards. 5 projects funded with earmarks or interagency transfers, and also RIF and TIFIA loan funding for our PTC and ATC fiber resiliency work on commuter rail. All of these projects are funded using, you can go back for me just a second. All of these projects are funded using formula funds, are divided into asset-based programs with non-formula funded items included either in other federal category or in the RIF category. Among these programs, stations and facilities represents the largest investment, followed by revenue vehicles. I would also note that these totals include 6 fiscal years, so federal fiscal 24 to 29, and represent what we anticipate will be obligated, not necessarily what we expect will be spent. We can go to the next slide. Our FTA formula funds programmed in the tip, approximately $3.2 billion in formula funds are included in the fiscal years, federal fiscal 24 to 29. Formula funding is allocated to different transit agencies, as you know, based on formulas created by the federal government, taking into account various transit agency statistics. Some really notable projects that include federal formula funding. We are very excited about our new project on the Fairmount Line infrastructure for decarbonized service, which will ultimately deliver the infrastructure necessary to operate a decarbonized service every 20 minutes on the Fairmount Line. You'll also see projects that have been included in prior years. North Station Drawbridge 1, a very important project for us to accommodate all of the North Side commuter rail service, and frankly Amtrak, their services as well. A Green Line Type 10 vehicle program to deliver 102 fully accessible light rail vehicles and all of the related infrastructure. And important for us, the Quincy Bus Facility Modernization, the next up program for us in our bus modernization to support first ever battery electric fleet. I think nearly last slide. Our FTA discretionary grants, we are active as we can possibly be. If folks have not yet met Glenn Geiler on the MBTA team, coming to us previously from BAT, she is now responsible for all of the MBTA's discretionary grants, and letters of support and other such things can be directed to her as we try to sort of capture as many dollars as we can for the region. Our proposed federal fiscal year 24 to 28 amendment and the federal fiscal 25 to 29 tip include 4 discretionary grant awards totaling $38.3 million. 2 new federal discretionary grants are included as part of the amendment, 1 from FTA and 1 from FHWA. You can see those in the middle of the screen here. 1 for FTA's Areas of Persistent Poverty program to support activities for en route battery electric bus charging at Ashmont Station, and then an FHWA Attain grant to support transit signal priority projects in the communities of Chelsea, Everett, and Revere. Lastly, our amendment will allow for the transfer of 2 raised grants from one from the City of Boston to support the MBTA's delivery of the Blue Hule Ave corridor project, and the transfer of funding from MassDOT to support the MBTA's delivery of the Lynn multimodal corridor project. And I'll take a deep breath and I'm going to hand it back to Sandy. Thank you all very much for your time.
Thank you, Lindsay and Ryan, for that exhaustive summary of what has, I'm sure, been a very involved and exhausting process. So just to wrap it up real quickly from the MPO perspective, the next couple of things that we are asking from the MPO, as you just heard from Lindsay, the expectation is to bring an amendment next week to kind of deal with those discretionary projects and to bring the current TIP into alignment with how our projects, with our project status currently, and then the transit program from our CIP that you have just heard about today has been will be wrapped into the approval of the 25 to 29 TIP when the MPO votes to release it for public comment next week. We, of course, are happy to answer questions. I would think in the interest of time and efficiency, the right approach here might be to kind of keep the questions at a high-level thematic level, and we can deal with more detailed project questions offline. But we are, of course, happy to take any questions to the extent of our ability to answer that folks would like to bring up.
Thank you, Sandy. Lynn?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I was going to take your advice anyways, Sandy, to save the questions for hopefully a meeting with the Rider Oversight Committee at some point during the comment period. But I just wanted to say on a high level that I really appreciate how far this process has come in terms of being transparent and extensive with how in the presentations, both these kinds of presentations, but also the documents. And I am confident that the extra time that you took to review each project is going to pay off, not only in the decisions that you've made with respect to the projects that are selected, but also the extent to which the public gets to understand even better the process. Thank you.
Thank you.
Eric Barassa.
I just want to echo what Len said. Really great presentation. You guys are doing a lot here. Really exciting to see the advancement of electric trains on the Fairmont line and sort of piloting that and seeing how that will work. I think that's super exciting. That's been talked about for a long time. The MPO, going back many years, is committed to building out more stations on the Fairmont line, seeing that service increase, seeing the fare sort of policy be more affordable for folks there, and now seeing this. I mean, all these pieces are going into place. That's exciting. The drawbridge obviously is huge. That's a massive one. I would one thing that I know it's challenging to do with this presentation, and I think Lindsay, you did a really good job of this, is highlight like the financial constraint challenges. What really sticks out is just when you look at like the track, signal, and power needs, like those are have the highest amount of unmet state of good repair need. Those are also the least exciting things for the public, right? Track, signals, and power. That's not a station. That's not a train. That's not. And I think, and there's no advocacy group out there that's calling for the track, signals, and power. There's advocates for the Blue Line, extension and the Blue Red connector and such. And so I think to the extent that you guys can maybe put more of a face to some of those issues in the presentation, maybe even highlight a few things that aren't going to be captured in the CIP that are in need, but we just don't have the funding for. They could be illustrative. It doesn't have to be a comprehensive list, but to continue to put a picture, to put a face to the problem of how we need more money for just our basic maintenance things. But overall, this is a really great presentation and very, very exciting to see, progress on a lot of things here. Thank you.
Yeah, I can really quick, Mr. Chair, just to respond to that. I appreciate that the things that have the most need are not the things that people go to ribbon cuttings for. And so that doesn't mean they're not important and essential. And I think, unfortunately, the greater Boston region is suffering through our collective realization of that. And so we hope to continue to focus on that area and and I think in this year, in this moment in time, not be distracted by the shiny things, that we have important critical work to do in the maintenance maintenance of way that is going to take time, and we would like it to be easier on our riders for sure, yet it has been deferred for a very long time. So as you will note, there's the dollars are also very low on the expansion side of the house right now because we need to put our dollars into that maintenance bucket. So thank you very much, Eric.
Jay Monty.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And just echoing, I think, Len and Eric's comments. First of all, fantastic presentation. I think it reflects, the immediate needs of the T to be putting this kind of investment into, as Eric said, the non-sexy things like track power and so on. We commented on the CIP last year, and I guess the critical comment we had was, this is a great set of goals in CIP for folks who already have transit service. It's a kind of not a great CIP for folks who don't. Mm-hmm. And so, I see this as a city that is building thousands of units of new housing, a city that has thousands of low-income service workers that rely on, unreliable transit service. And I can't really go back and say there's much in there for these folks. Of course, the core of the system is critical, and I there's not a bad project in the CIP, but I think I cringe when I hear, we're staying away from shiny new things, because sometimes those shiny new things are actually really critical things for folks who don't have service. And so I understand where you guys are coming from and why the CIP is this way, and it's badly needed, and I understand it, but having been in the city for a long time and worked in this field for a long time, we always keep coming back to the same place, which is those that don't have service continue to not have service, and I hope that will change in the future.
Yeah. I appreciate the comment. Happy to have another conversation as well. As we think about the release of the preferred alternative for Silver Line extension, obviously Everett is in the heart of our focus there, and so we did submit a raise grant there on that this go round, and hope to continue to see that move forward, because we know there are communities that are not as well served as they should be. This is not a dig on the decisions made in the past, certainly, and we need to be better going forward in the future, but also a reality that we are at a painful moment. So I look forward to continuing to talk with you about that.
No, thanks, Lindsay. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Jen Rowe.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So yeah, similar gratitude for the Fairmont line, particularly on our end. Also wanted to highlight that the continued commitment to bus priority. I know that with so much going on with rail, it can be hard to keep that going, but it is so important, and I think a way that we can kind of help with that balance of kind of expanding service and improving existing service. We definitely want to take you all up on the offer to kind of connect offline. We had some questions about that Fairmont line funding, the funding levels for the B&E branch, the status of the red-blue connector, and also the bi-level coaches line, and kind of how that relates to Rail Vision. So we definitely look forward to connecting on those items. If we could schedule something ideally in the next week, just because we have to take a vote on this this coming Thursday, that would be fantastic. One question that maybe you may know off the top of your head, I was just curious about the North Station draw, and whether we were really excited about the bike ped connectivity component to that, and I didn't see it on the description, and just wanted to ask if that was just in the interest of saving space on the slide.
Yeah, I will have to get back to you on that one, Jen. I know there's been multiple iterations of design on North Station Draw, and particularly trying to see how we can phase it. The project is in total a $1.2 billion investment, and is absolutely essential for us. I can't say off the top of my head I remember exactly what the bike and pedestrian components may or may not be, but we can certainly have a conversation with you. it's much of the funding for that too is in the outside of the full CIP 5-year window. That is going to be a lengthy and intense project.
Totally understood. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'm going to encourage folks to use Sandy as our point of contact, and we'll make sure we get follow-ups for these various things.
Steve Olenoff.
I just want to say that I am an advocate of what Eric was talking about, and the other speakers also. But since this is the first time was on the CIP we're seeing anything on the electrification of the railroads, could you give us a little bit more detail? There's like a $40 million item there. Is there anything else? And what does that consist of? What does that give us, and what kind of timetable?
So we're in the middle of an active procurement. So I'm in, there's some limits to what I can say. I believe it closes tomorrow. So maybe invite me back in a couple of weeks. But we have a due diligence posting out. The MBTA received as part of our innovation portal, which is approved under FTA, a unsolicited proposal to electrify the Fairmount line. We have now gone forward. We review that and do some of our own internal, does this make sense? Do we think we like this idea? Then we post a due diligence, which is what is currently outstanding, seeking if there's anybody else in the community who would be interested in providing such a service to us. There are, I would say, 3 different components to that for us to think about financially. I think we all agree electrification, on figuring out how to electrify our vast commuter rail network is important and is going to be tricky and hard. This proposal uses discontinuous catenary and battery electric EMUs as part of the solve for that on the Fairmount line, specifically the 10-mile corridor. 3 different sort of bigger financial pieces. One is around the infrastructure needed to electrify, so catenary maintenance facilities of the sort. That's what we have as a new federal funding. A piece about potentially leasing the vehicles themselves, because obviously our locomotives are not battery electric. We need a new locomotive, and there are dollars currently in the CIP for vehicles for rolling stock on commuter rail that we would potentially repurpose. Lots to work out there, again, to see for the future. And then lastly, operating costs, which would not hit for multiple years. So it wouldn't be capital costs, but it'd be operating costs to provide such a service. So, but the hope is that we would be providing service in calendar year 2027 or thereabouts. So again, happy to have a conversation in the future with the MPO as to where that's heading. But given that I have an open procurement, I'm going to stop there if I can.
Well, basically, all those things are in that 40 million. That's where we'd find them.
The first bucket is the infrastructure only, sir. No, it's just the infrastructure on the electrification side of the rail and the vehicle fleet. And the vehicle maintenance facilities that we would need to do the charging and charging capacity.
All right, we'll get more details later. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Other questions? Thank you, Lindsay.
Thank you all for having us. Sorry to run so long.
Yep, no worries. Next item on the agenda, I believe, is a presentation of the MassDOT CIP. Michelle Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, everyone. Pleasure to be speaking with you all today. I'm Michelle Scott. I'm the Manager of Capital Planning in the Office of Transportation Planning. And I'm going to talk to you today about MassDOT CIP, which has some overlapping elements with a number of the presentations you've heard today. I want to cover 4 things. First, just an introduction to what the CIP is, then to talk a little bit about its relationship to MPO TIPS and the STIP and how they all fit together. Talk a little bit about what kinds of things we're anticipating for the FY 25 through 29 CIP, and then close out with some information about our upcoming comment period and how we hope you all can participate and work with your constituents and networks to help others provide feedback on the CIP. Next slide, please. So this slide provides an overview of the CIP, much like the TIP and the STIP. This is a rolling 5-year plan. It covers planning, construction, and capital maintenance of the transportation system throughout the Commonwealth. And it's, like others, it's a fiscally constrained plan based on available sources and reflects planned spending and cash flows. And I'll talk about how that's a little bit distinct from the STIP in a little while. It includes investments across modes, ranging from roads and bridges, bicycle and pedestrian items, funding for our state rail network, state support for transit investments through the RTAs and the MBTA, public use airports, our enterprise services, including the Office of Transportation Planning, and the RMV service centers and infrastructure. The organizing principles that we use for the CIP are shown in the diagram on the right. Over the past number of cycles, and for this cycle, we've used kind of a 3-priority framework focused on reliability, modernization, and expansion, with expansion really referring to investments that we're making in the statewide bicycle and pedestrian network and in projects like South Coast Rail. Within each of those priority areas, we have a number of CIP programs that are designed to advance those priorities, and within those are nested projects that support those goals. Next slide, please. This slide outlines the different funding sources that support our CIP. Federal funding makes up approximately 43 to 45% of support in the CIP, includes funding from various modal administrations on the formula side, as well as discretionary funds that we may receive from USDOT or the modal administrations. And we reflect any awards that we receive once those awards are in place in our CIP document. The next category is state funding. We get a lot of support from state bond cap, which is provided by the Executive Office for Administration and Finance and is based on general obligation bond proceeds. We also have a number of special obligation bonds that support different transportation projects, as well as use of grant anticipation notes to fund things like the Next Generation Bridge program. That state funding category makes up approximately another 35% of sources that support the CIP. The last two categories, MassDOT sources, primarily from the tolled facilities, the MHS, the Tobin Bridge, and the Western Turnpike, and then a variety of other contributing sources for our projects. Next slide, please. So this diagram and the information on the slide is intended to show kind of how projects that are included within the STIP are part of the overall CIP. And so, of course, decisions that are made by this board and boards for MPOs throughout the Commonwealth make up a substantial portion of what we're showing in the CIP, both in terms of highway projects as well as state match for federally aided transit projects, particularly for the RTAs. So those are highlighted in green. You can see in blue the number of other investment types that I spoke of across MassDOT divisions. Just to kind of support the connection to the MBTA discussion earlier, MassDOT does provide state support for some MBTA investments. In recent years, these have included the Green Line extension and also for the South Coast Rail project. And these are supported by state-issued rail enhancement program special obligation bonds. In terms of support for the RTAs, I believe Felicia during her presentation may have referenced RTA cap. This is the state bond cap or general obligation bond funding that the Commonwealth provides to the RTAs to match federal dollars that they receive for their projects and support other transit investments as well. So that's just kind of a highlight of overall where the STIP content fits in. As you can see, this diagram is roughly proportional to the breakdown in the CIP, so it's a very sizable component. Next slide, please. Just wanted to briefly touch on some shared characteristics and some differences between the CIP and the STIP. So the orange box on the left highlights unique CIP features. The purple box on the right highlights features unique to the STIP, and that red box in the center highlights the features that they have in common. Some notable things that they do have in common, they both follow that reliability, modernization, expansion framework. So if you review the STIP and later the CIP, you see that projects that are coming from the different MPOs around the state are integrated into that reliability, modernization, and expansion framework. Again, both documents are fiscally constrained and both are influenced by the project development process. In terms of needs, investments being guided by needs, results from asset management systems that prioritize things like bridge and pavement investments, scores that are given to projects, and of course the readiness of projects to be included in a particular 5-year STIP or CIP. Some major differences, the timelines captured in each document are different. CIP is organized on a state fiscal year timeline from July to June, with the STIP organized on a federal fiscal year timeline from October to September. It reflects the CIP does reflect cash flows. So while a project may be obligated and scheduled for advertising in 1 year as reflected in the STIP, you'll see this project kind of carry through multiple years in the CIP that reflects the actual outflow of spending for a particular project. Finally, STIP, of course, is ultimately approved by FHWA and FTA, CIP approved by the MassDOT Board of Directors. Next slide, please. So transitioning to talking a little bit more about the factors that shape CIP development, particularly for fiscal year 25 through 29, kind of group these into external and internal groupings. On the external side, we're of course influenced by the ongoing implementation of the bipartisan infrastructure law, both in terms of the creation of new programs and the continuation and additional funding available through existing programs. Of course, that's the federal revenue side, including not only both formula, but the dramatic expansion of federal discretionary grant opportunities, which MassDOT pursues aggressively to support its capital plan. So moving on from that federal piece, also constrained by the availability of state funds, either the bond cap that I referenced or resources and travel levels on our tolling system, which affects revenues from that system as well. As I've referenced, we're also shaped by the decisions made by partner organizations, including, of course, the MPOs. We also bring in changes and updates based on feedback we've gotten through the CIP process, including our public engagement stage, which I'll talk about later in the presentation. On the internal factor side, we're of course guided by the priorities of the Healey-Driscoll administration. A major component that's starting to come into play this year and will become even more of an influence in subsequent years is the development and implementation of the Beyond Mobility statewide long-range plan and other initiatives that are organized under what we're calling the MassDOT 15 umbrella, including the development of a strategic MassDOT business plan. And these things will basically take a lot of the action steps and priorities identified through the Beyond Mobility planning process, which I think you'll be hearing more about at the next MPO meeting from Derek Cravat, and carries them through and will certainly influence the development of CIP programs and selection of projects. Other influences include our modal plans and asset management plans, our tracking of performance measures, and ongoing process improvements we make to the CIP. Next slide, please. So I wanted to highlight some focus areas that we're directing investment toward within our overall reliability, modernization, and expansion framework for 25 to 29. They include the 4 categories referenced on the screen: safety, climate stewardship, asset management, and partnerships with municipalities. These focus areas are not only shaped by Healey-Driscoll administration priorities, but also themes that were emerging through the Beyond Mobility process. And I'll talk a little bit more about planned spending in each of these categories as we move through the presentation. The arrow at the bottom highlights our continuing emphasis on supporting social and geographic equity, which we manage not only through individual project selection processes throughout MassDOT, but also do checks on through a CIP equity analysis that we perform for our final plan each cycle. Next slide, please. Should you move ahead to the next slide, please? Thanks. Just want to highlight the overall CIP development timeline. A lot of the work begins in earnest in the fall in terms of establishing our needs and priorities for the upcoming cycle, revisiting our CIP investment programs and identifying relevant projects, identifying and refining the funding resources, making final decisions on investments, and then developing a plan that'll be available for public review and ultimately MassDOT board approval. You'll notice that these bars are long because these are very iterative stages that we work through with each of the divisions and with our partners in different Commonwealth agencies to refine our funding sources and narrow down to a list of final projects for inclusion in the CIP. You'll notice those 2 stars highlight our major board votes, both to release a draft CIP for public comment in May and for the board to approve a final CIP expected in June. You'll notice in that blue box towards the bottom that the CIP and STIP public comment periods are contemporaneous. Both documents are out for public comment at the same time. Next slide, please. So I want to highlight kind of where we are in the process for now, and then talk about some areas where we're making investments. Right now, we're very much engaged with the Executive Office for Administration and Finance, or ANF for short, to review our proposed CIP, you know, and look at funding constraints and collect feedback from them. We're, you know, of course, working with information coming in from the various MPOs about planned projects for your TIP, both on the MPO discretionary side as well as the MassDOT side. And I believe a copy of the MassDOT provided state highway list for the Boston region is available on today's meeting calendar page. And I believe John Bouchard, Deputy Engineer for the Highway Administration, excuse me, Deputy Chief Engineer for the Highway Administration, will be presenting on that on the 18th. So those are 2 major factors. Also, of course, continuing to await announcements on major federal grant awards that may influence our program. You know, key dates I want to highlight, of course, are those board meeting dates, May 15th in May, June 18th in June, and our anticipated public comment period of 21 days running from May 16th through June 7th. Next slide, please. So this slide functions as a dashboard for the proposed MassDOT CIP spending. It's organized in 2 ways, both by spending across division or business unit, as well as spending according to the 3 major priority areas that I referenced at the beginning of the presentation. As you can see, based on where we are in the process, our proposed CIP is about $16 billion. Of that, you can see in the chart at the bottom left-hand corner, approximately 57% of that spending is falling within the reliability category, with another 27% falling within that modernization category. So we're really kind of focusing on those 2 areas to support providing a safe and reliable transportation system. Next slide, please. So I want to highlight some spending in the 4 different focus areas that I identified earlier in the presentation. In 2 of these, the safety and asset management categories are captured on this slide. As I've just noted, about $13.5 billion, or roughly 84% of our CIP is focused in these areas, with, you know, approximately over $5 million for ongoing support, replacement, rehabilitation, and maintenance for bridges throughout the Commonwealth. Support for systematic safety improvements, you know, in support of moving towards Vision Zero for traffic fatalities and serious injuries, and other related supports across modes, including over $500 million for support for our public use airports. Next slide, please. In the climate stewardship category, we're focused on 3 major areas, providing alternatives to car and truck travel being the first, the second being electrification, the third being supporting resilient infrastructure. In this first category, on this slide highlights a couple of investments in that first alternatives to car and truck travel category. They include support for our shared use path and bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure throughout the Commonwealth, over $500 million there. Support for regional transit authority and other transit investments. And of course, you know, $143 million dedicated to advancing the South Coast Rail project. Next slide, please. Here are some examples on the electrification and resiliency side. A portion of our electrification investments is focused on expanding vehicle charging along major roadway corridors throughout the Commonwealth through funds provided by the National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure, or NEVI program. Also continuing to support the regional transit authorities and ongoing investments they're making to transition their fleets to electric vehicles, and of course providing for the infrastructure that's needed to support that transition in terms of facility upgrades, charging infrastructure, et cetera. On the resiliency side, the CIP includes a resiliency specific program focused on culvert, dam, and flood control improvements. And of course, there's ongoing planning efforts that the CIP supports to make sure we understand what assets throughout the Commonwealth are prone to climate hazards and how we can plan for more resilient infrastructure going forward. Next slide, please. That fourth category, support for partnerships with municipalities, is supported by a variety of local aid programs that we provide through the CIP. The one folks are probably most familiar with is the Chapter 90 program, which is supported through state funds in the CIP. But we offer a variety of others, ranging from complete streets to support to municipalities for repaving and small bridge projects that may not be covered by federal aid dollars, as well as our popular Shared Streets and Spaces program that was introduced during the pandemic. Next slide, please. So just want to highlight a couple of other major highlights for the CIP. Definitely continuing to support major initiatives in progress going into 25 through 29. Example of a major project in this area includes ongoing work on the I-90-495 interchange in Hopkinton and Westboro. Definitely a lot of activity on the rail side, advancements for the Compass Rail program for passenger rail service throughout the Commonwealth, which has been supported by a number of recent federal discretionary awards to the CRISI program, as well as I mentioned, ongoing investment for South Coast Rail, continuing to provide resources for the Cape Cod bridges and the I-90 Alston multimodal project. Major grant awards were also received in these categories as well. And we're also working with ANF to review some possible new CIP programs for inclusion for this year, including a program to support transportation management associations, water transportation pilot program for the areas in Boston Harbor, and a freight improvements program that'll complement some of the freight investments that we're making in other CIP programs, and specifically leverage funding received from the National Highway Freight Program. Next slide, please. So just want to close out about some information about our upcoming comment period, which we expect will start May 16th. We'll have a couple of different ways that folks will be available to provide comment, including through our website, including through email, and we'll be providing a web-based public comment tool as well. We're also working with the MPOs around the state to organize public meetings. That map shows how we're proposing to break up the Commonwealth into 6 areas for organizing those meetings and providing kind of region-specific highlights. We're expecting that the region focus in the Boston area will be either May 20th or 21st, so please stay tuned for more information about that. And you can check mass.gov/CIP for more details about public engagement. Next slide, please. I want to talk a little bit about how we use feedback on the CIP process to certainly encourage folks to provide feedback once it's available. We certainly share comments on projects that are planned or underway with our division staff. These can have really specific impacts on how projects are developed and implemented through the construction phase. We also value feedback on projects that are not yet included in the CIP just to understand ongoing priorities. We welcome comments about larger themes within the CIP, the programs that are available, or how we're organizing according to different priorities. And finally, feedback about how we communicate about the CIP and engage residents is also welcome. Next slide, please. So I want to close out with a little bit of a reference to where the CIP is headed, especially in terms with transitioning to a framework that aligns well with Beyond Mobility. As you may know, and we'll hear more about next week, public comment on the draft Beyond Mobility plan is open through May 5th, and then there are a number of resources available to support receipt of public comment on that. We're already starting to think about what our CIP will look like under the priority areas and action steps that Beyond Mobility outlines. What we're finding and initiating this work is that this will really help us move from our transition from what projects do to the kinds of outcomes they help achieve in terms of connectivity and accessibility, travel experience, etc. The diagram on the right-hand kind of this part of the slide highlights an example of a program transition, our shared use path bicycle and pedestrian program, to show how it'll move from our reliability expansion modernization framework to some of the priority areas and action steps outlined under Beyond Mobility. So I believe that's the end of my remarks. I really appreciate everybody's attention this morning and happy to take any questions. Turning it back to you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Michelle. And before we take questions, I will note that Michelle also noted that the Highway Division's tip list is available for review. I think it's posted online. It's certainly available to the MPO, and John Bouchard will be presenting on it and answering questions at next week's meeting. But other questions on the CIP? Seeing none. Thank you, Michelle. Next item on the agenda is member items. Are there any? Seeing and hearing none. Can I get a motion and a second to adjourn?
I know.
Please state your name for the record. Eric Barrasso.
Eric Barrasso, I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Is there a second?
Dickens will second. Dickens seconds.
Motion having been made and seconded. We are adjourned. We'll see everybody next week. Bye, guys.
Bye, y'all.